Hello friend, welcome. If you're new, my name is Becky, and today is my husband Josh's birthday. It's his 35th birthday today, and I am going to make him the dinner he requested today, which is going to be sheet pan El Pastor tacos with a coleslaw and a jalapeno cilantro dressing, homemade tortillas, and a yellow cake with chocolate frosting because that was his request. While we're in the kitchen today, I'm also gonna prep tomorrow's dinner. I have time today to do some meal prep, but tomorrow I am going to be doing some fun canning projects. So I figured since I'm in the kitchen, it's not gonna take me very much time to go ahead and prep tomorrow's dinner, which is gonna be slow cooked in the slow cooker chuck roast with a homemade raspberry chipotle barbecue sauce. So that's gonna be really easy to pull together, and it'll be nice for me to prep that. And tomorrow morning, I'll be able to just push the slow cooker button and turn it on. And we're also gonna make some hamburger buns today. So I am first getting this pineapple prepped for the El Pastor tacos. I've never made El Pastor tacos before, and it is pouring outside. So we're gonna do this in the oven. I found a really exciting new recipe that we're gonna try together that sounded delicious. So the first thing I wanna do is go ahead and get the pineapple prepped. I probably should be baking the cake. So let me actually go ahead and preheat my oven, because as soon as I get this chicken marinating in the refrigerator, we'll move on to our cake so I can bake that and let that cool, and then we can decorate it for Josh's birthday tonight. This marinade's gonna come together really quickly, and I figured I might as well mix this together before I put our pineapple in here and our chicken, because it will be easier to do that. So we're gonna start with tomato paste, and then we're gonna start with this chipotles and adobo. But the cool thing that I found is these are already chopped, so I don't even have to chop them, which is really nice. We're gonna use this in both of our recipes today. And then pepper, salt. Let's do 2 of these garlic pucks. They're still a little frozen. And then a good bit of honey. I will link all the recipes that we're gonna be making today down below, because we are gonna be making a lot of them. I'm not gonna put all of this in our chicken, so half of this is gonna go in here just for a side dish. The rest of our pineapple is gonna go in here like this, and we're gonna roast this pineapple with our chicken. I have 2 packages of chicken here. I have 2 chicken breasts and a couple chicken thighs, and I'm gonna cut these down a little bit. These are some chicken breasts and thighs from a family friend who actually raised this chicken for me, and I had the honor of going and helping process them, which was a very unique experience. I'm gonna cover this, pop this in the fridge. I want lots of surface area, so when we bake this at a really high temperature, we can get good caramelization. So our dinner protein is now done and marinating. We're gonna switch gears to the cake. It's actually been about 20 minutes since we first started putting this marinade together, because my family came in and they wanted to have an early lunch. So they had lunch. While they had lunch, I was able to read over my cake recipe. We're gonna make a yellow cake per Josh's request with a chocolate frosting. This is his favorite type of cake. I have never made this recipe before, but I've made lots of her recipes. I can link the blog post recipe down below, so if you wanna make this, you can. But the cool thing about this recipe is it calls for fresh milled flour, which I went ahead and weighed out already. And I'm going to grind that in just a minute after I get going on the first part of this cake. Because the first part of the cake, it actually needs to cream the butter, the oil, and the sugar together before we knead the flour. So I figured I would get this going because this needs to beat for about 3 to 4 minutes, get nice, light, and fluffy. And so that's what we're gonna do. I asked Josh, do you want me to try a new recipe for your birthday cake with fresh milled flour, or do you want me to make just a white flour cake? And he has been really enjoying the fresh milled stuff. The tortillas we're gonna make today are just gonna be made with all-purpose flour because I haven't found a recipe yet that I really love with fresh milled flour. There's one in her cookbook that I wanna try, but I figured since this is his birthday, we're already experimenting with, got a piece of vanilla in there, a new birthday cake recipe. Let's just do a tried and true tortilla recipe. In here, I have the vanilla sugar that I made along with butter, and it says to add the oil in at the same time, and we're gonna cream this together for 3 to 4 minutes. While that's mixing, I'm gonna weigh out the chocolate we need for our chocolate ganache frosting, and I need 12 ounces. I don't know if 12 ounces is gonna fit in that bowl. Well, we'll try, and I'll grab another one if I need to in just a second. Oh, I'm on grams. The wheat that I'm grinding for the flour for this recipe is a soft white wheat. It has a little less gluten in it, which makes for a nice cake. And the recipe says that to the flour, you can add your leavening agent. So while it's grinding to this bowl, I'm gonna go ahead and add the baking powder, baking soda, cornstarch, and salt. I figured I might as well get those measured out while it was grinding. And now that the wheat has been ground and our butter and sugar mixture is nice, light, and fluffy, I can go ahead and add my eggs. These are eggs from my chickens. My chickens are starting to lay eggs again. They turned 5 this year, and I thought that they were not going to be laying very many eggs this year. But over the weekend, basically 3 days, I got 7 eggs. So we are definitely in egg production now that it's a little bit warmer around here, and the days are getting a little longer. So that's exciting. So to this, I went ahead and I added the vanilla extract and the almond extract. This recipe calls for almond extract. It says it's optional, but I know Josh loves almond extract, so I went ahead and added that. I only think I've made a yellow cake 1 or 2 other times, and I don't remember that being in the recipe, and that was definitely a nice touch to this recipe. I also added some vinegar. The recipe called for just white distilled vinegar, and it also called for yogurt and some heavy cream. So I'm alternating between the yogurt, the heavy cream, and adding in our dry mixture. I'm going to mix that, and that needs to sit for about 15 minutes before we put it into our prepared baking pans. Now this is the second cake that I have made with fresh milled flour. The last cake we made together was a Devil's Food chocolate cake, and it was so delicious. I actually think about that cake sometimes. I liked that cake better than this cake because I like chocolate cake better than yellow cake. Josh preferred this cake recipe over that recipe because he prefers yellow cake over chocolate cake. And it's been really fun experimenting making baked goods using fresh milled flour. I'll just let you know this cake does turn out absolutely delicious. Josh enjoyed it. We were able to share some of it with some friends and they really enjoyed it. And it was just a really yummy dessert to have for his birthday. Oh, I guess I didn't prepare the baking sheets yet. So I have 2 cake pans here. I lined them with some parchment paper and then I sprayed them so that this cake would pop out no problem. And I never flour my cake tins, and I never have a problem with round cake pans with the cake coming out of the pan and sticking if I spray them first and put a piece of parchment paper down and then spray the parchment paper. They always release from the pan really, really well. The only time I have trouble getting a cake to release from a pan is when I use a bundt pan. And I think my bundt pan needs to find its way into the trash can because it's all scratched up. And I think that's why it doesn't like to release. But these cakes come out of this pan no problem, just like this. The last cake I made with fresh milled flour was a chocolate cake and it was much runnier than this. So I'm curious to see how the difference with these turns out. that was probably one of the best cakes I've ever had. And I still think about it on a regular basis thinking, man, I wish I had a piece of that cake after dinner. But this, just like that other recipe though, does need to sit for 15 minutes before we put it into the oven. So this is the perfect time to go ahead and clean up a little bit. And we're gonna get our frosting made up next, or part of the frosting, because that frosting has to sit for about 2 hours to come to room temperature, at least the first part of it does, before we can turn it into frosting and decorate our cake. So I have the dishwasher unloaded here. I'm just gonna take most of these dishes and just put them directly into the dishwasher so that I can kind of clean as I go. Doesn't always happen that I clean as I go, but I'm gonna try to do that today so that when we sit down for dinner tonight, I don't have a huge mess that needs to be cleaned up. Or Josh. Josh a lot of times does the dishes. Most of the time he does the dishes after dinner for me. And it's his birthday, so I'm gonna see if I can try to reduce the amount of dishes I make. Last year at this time, we had a 30-person dinner party for Josh's birthday. And this year, it's just my little family. It's gonna be quiet, it's gonna be relaxing, and I think it's gonna be delicious. I might even run a quick cycle on my dishwasher. My dishwasher does a really good job on a 60-minute cycle, and I can usually then get it unloaded and loaded again before. There's some butter in here that I do not want going down my dishwasher. So I'm gonna clean that out with a paper towel. Dogs, I think it's time for you guys to go outside. Come on. Our little dog is not quite asking yet to go outside. Go. So I have to remember to let him out very regularly. Those are eggshells going to the chickens. I'll set those up there. And if I have more eggshells today, I will just put them up there. I'm gonna go ahead and get this started because it's basically actually full at this point. This is now hot and steaming. I'm gonna pour my chocolate chips in there, and I am going to just let that sit for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to it. The next recipe isn't gonna be very hard. It's gonna come together pretty quick, so let's get that going, and that's going to be a raspberry chipotle barbecue pulled pork, pulled beef sandwich. I thought I had some raspberry jam in the freezer, but I am all out of that, so I just got this, and what I wanna do is actually strain the seeds out because we're gonna make a homemade barbecue sauce, and I don't think we want seeds in it. So I'm gonna microwave that for, let's try 45 seconds, and while that's warming up and melting, I'm gonna grab my slow cooker because we're going to go ahead and just prep our dinner in what we're gonna cook this in tomorrow. Or I guess, I don't know, maybe we'll have this the next day. Whenever I decide to cook this, it will be prepped and ready for me, and I can make it right in my slow cooker. This is bubbling hot, so I have my pot holder here. I'm gonna pull this out, and I'm gonna strain some raspberry jam into my slow cooker. And this is gonna be the base of our barbecue sauce, the sweetness that we want out of a barbecue sauce. It smells so good. I just heated it up so that it would go through the strainer a little bit quicker and easier. Before we finish our barbecue sauce, I think it's good to come over here and mix our chocolate and our cream together. So this is the ganache part of the ganache frosting that's gonna go on tonight's cake. And this has to be completely stirred in, mixed in, and then cooled. And then we're gonna add a few more ingredients to make an actual frosting. You can make frosting and pour this over a cake, but that's not what this recipe says to do. So we're gonna follow the recipe. So this right here, a ganache, is the base of chocolate truffles. Okay, so at this point, it's definitely been 15 minutes. Let's get this cake in the oven. This is gonna cook for, I think it said 25 to 30 minutes. So I'm gonna set a timer for 20 and then we'll check it and go from there. I will link this recipe down below. This is a new one to me. I'm really excited. I think I got most of the seeds out. The recipes didn't say to strain the seeds out, but I think my family would like it better that way. And I'm gonna eyeball the ingredients. So this is ketchup, apple cider vinegar, chipotles and adobo, molasses. This is gonna give it its signature barbecue sauce taste as well. Garlic, I'm gonna add quite a bit of it, more than the recipe calls for. Tabasco, this is not in the recipe, but I think that little vinegar zip will be good. I'm gonna stir all these ingredients together and then I'm gonna give this a taste test before we add our meat to this. This smells incredible. Yum. Oh my goodness. This is gonna be amazing. You know what I think I'm gonna add to this? Tablespoon or 2 of Worcestershire sauce. Give it a little bit more umami. This is amazing. Yum. Yum, yum, yum. This is gonna be a huge hit with some hamburger buns, some homemade coleslaw on top with our shredded beef, which is what we're gonna do next, is get our beef shredded. I'm just setting that over there for now. I'm gonna get this preheating, this pot, because we're gonna brown our chuck roast before we stick it in our slow cooker. Before I brown my chuck roast, I am gonna take a minute here to remove any really big pieces of fat. I'm not gonna remove all of it, but just any really big pieces of fat so that that doesn't render down into our final sauce. There's plenty still to add delicious flavor. We just don't want it really, really greasy. I was thinking that because we're making a thick barbecue sauce, it would be hard to strain it later. So I have one side seasoned. I'm gonna put the seasoned side down in my piping hot enamel cast iron pan. Once that's nice and browned, after about 5 minutes, I'm gonna turn it over and brown the other side. Now, while I am browning my chuck roast, I am going to grind up the wheat that we need for our hamburger buns. It was perfect that I made these hamburger buns because we used these hamburger buns not only for these beef sliders, but a few days later, I do end up making some Philly cheesesteaks, and it was so nice having hamburger buns made up that we could use those for the Philly cheesesteaks. I'm gonna let this cool just a bit, and then I'll put the lid on it and I'll pop this in the fridge tomorrow morning, first thing, or the next day, or whenever we end up having this. I will put this on high for probably 8 to 10 hours. The recipe that I'm getting inspired by this is not actually a slow cooker recipe. It's just for the sauce in and of itself. And I'm not gonna add any extra liquid to this. What I have found when it comes to slow cooker recipes is that generally they have too much liquid in them and they just are really, really runny. This chuck roast will produce quite a bit of its own broth, so I'm not gonna add anything to this. We're just gonna go with it like this. So at this point, we have our flour milled for our hamburger buns. I actually purchased some buns at Trader Joe's yesterday when I went shopping. I'm gonna throw those in my freezer because I'm going out of town for a girls' trip, for a baby shower, and I will pull those out right before I leave so that my family can have those for buns on sandwiches or whatever it might be. I'm gonna grab my mixer, that's my warmed milk. I don't know if I even mentioned that we're making homemade hamburger buns and homemade tortillas today. I also bought tortillas at the store, but I have a project I'm doing tomorrow, and I think I'm gonna use those tortillas for that because I don't feel like making enough tortillas for what I need for my project for tomorrow. And since it's Josh's birthday, I wanna make sure we have his favorite homemade tortillas for his birthday. I'm just gonna make them my tried and true way. So I do have really hot milk here because I am going to do the trick that most fresh milled wheat recipes call for. And that's where you actually mix up your flour and your wet ingredients minus the yeast so that it can sit in the fresh milled wheat can absorb the liquids, and that is gonna cool down while it sits here for 15 minutes. So I got the milk way hotter than I normally would if I was gonna add the yeast right away. So this is actually a dinner roll recipe that I shaped like a hamburger bun. They were fantastic last time I made them, so I'm just making them again the exact same way I made them last time, with milk instead of butter as well. With milk instead of water as well. This is the butter. I'm gonna mix that together. I do remember now that I added a little more flour than the recipe called for. So I'm gonna go ahead and just mill up a little bit more flour. Let me weigh out or measure out. I'll just eyeball it. I added probably about a 1/4 cup more flour. And this is hard white wheat. The last flour we used for the cake, oh my gosh. I feel like those are not even close to being done. Okay. Whew. Those are getting pretty dark though, and they're nowhere near done. They're pretty wiggly, so I'm gonna put a piece of foil on the top so they don't overcook on the top before the inside's done. I just added salt. It's all mixed together. I'm gonna let this sit for about 15 minutes before we add our yeast packet. I'm getting out all of my ingredients for my tortillas, and my timer just went off for the cake. I can't help myself. I am gonna 1.5 this recipe because if I'm already making tortillas, I know they will get eaten. My family will love them. We are almost through all the tortillas we made together last time with the fresh milled wheat, and they didn't turn out super great. They taste delicious. They work perfect for quesadillas, but I can't roll them even if I steam them first. So we're still going through those. They're in the freezer. Ooh, these kind of sunk a little bit. I don't want to mess up Josh's birthday cake. I think, let me take its temperature. Actually, that's probably what I should do. Okay, I think it's done. This is a new recipe. Last time I made a cake using fresh milled flour, it was so good, and it wasn't a birthday, so I hope this one turns out just as good because it's a birthday. Feels done. It just sunk a little bit. Okay, we're gonna call that done. We won't need that for a while. That's gonna take a good bit to cool so we can move on to the tortillas. And I forgot what I was saying about these tortillas. Oh, so the tortillas that I made taste good, but I still need to work on the flour, fresh flour, tenderness ability. And there is one in this cookbook that I have, but I'm already trying a new recipe for his birthday for his cake. So I was like, let's just go with the tried and true tortilla recipe. So that was 2 for, this is a 1/2 cup measure. It's 3, that's 1 recipe's worth. 1, 2. This is just all-purpose flour. 3, should I just double it while I'm at it? Yeah, because I might need it for tomorrow's project. 1, 2. I only bought 12 tortillas, and I am making broth tomorrow, beef broth, and there's quite a bit of meat on the bones. So I was thinking I would go ahead and make taquitos with, or I think they're technically called flautas when you use flour tortillas. Now I'm gonna add my baking powder. And this is a doubled recipe, so I have to remember that. I'm gonna get some salt, because I wanna have some meal prep in the freezer for my family. I'm basically gonna be gone for 1.5 days. We leave Friday afternoon, and then we come back Saturday afternoon. But I only have a couple breakfast sandwiches left for meal prep. So I thought if I could get some of these beef taquitos in there, then that would just be a nice lunch prep. And it's a way to use up the beef that I'm gonna get off the bones for making the beef bone broth. Okay, making a mess here. So we got our flour, our baking powder. You can do this in the mixer, but my mixer is obviously being used right now. And I don't mind getting a little bit of an arm workout today. I'm okay if a little extra water went in there, or oil went in there, because it'll just make them nice and soft. This is hot water. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to get in there with my hands, but I'm going to get in there first with this. If you're wanting to make tortillas and you want it to go much quicker, go ahead and skip this part. Throw this in your mixer and mix them up with the mixer, and it will go quite a bit faster. I just was in the kitchen. I didn't feel like taking the dough out of the mixer and then making the tortillas and then putting the dough back when we add the yeast and things like that. So I was just going to do it by hand. This dough does need to be kneaded a little bit. I could tell, especially when I was just watching it back, a little more liquid than the recipe calls for. So when I was kneading these tortilla dough, I went ahead and added a little bit of flour when I was kneading it. The goal is to have it nice, soft, and silky. Make sure everything is incorporated well. I thought I had it where I wanted it, and then I went ahead and kneaded it a couple more times, and now I'm going to put it in the bowl and let it rest. The reason you want to let your tortilla dough rest is so that the gluten can relax and it's a lot easier to roll out. So now to our hamburger bun recipe, I'm going to go ahead and add my yeast packet. That's instant yeast, and then I'm going to turn out my cakes. I was going back and forth. I was kind of stressed because they did sink in the middle a little bit, and I have not had that really happen to me when I've made cakes in the past, and so I was a little worried that the texture was going to be like undercooked or something like that. That's why I kept taking its temperature, but it was fine. I end up, you'll see, cutting the higher ends so that it lays flat and it ends up being, no one's going to know that it sunk a little bit in the middle. The texture wasn't off at all, and that's what I was worried about. Now I'm going to take my tortilla dough, I'm going to divide it into individual tortillas. My original one was a few extra tortillas, but I want these to be more like taco size, so I reshaped them and redivided them until I thought that they would be a nice size tortilla. This was so nice that I went ahead and made a double batch of tortillas because, like I said, we're going to be making beef broth, and there's some meat that we're going to get off the bones when we make the beef broth. And I didn't want to just throw that meat in the freezer knowing we would not be able to go through that much the following, days, because I'm doing a bunch of meal prep. I knew that I wanted to turn that meat into something that would be usable and a convenience item for me later. And this worked out so great. So I'm going to roll these out really thin and I'm going to cook them up. I have my carbon steel griddle pan back there. You guys see me use that thing all the time. I love it. And I'm going to cook my tortillas on that. The first couple ones usually take a little longer because it's still heating up, and then the additional tortillas end up cooking pretty quick. So I've gotten this down to a pretty good system where I can cook 2 tortillas and I can roll out 2 tortillas at the same time. And by the time the 2 tortillas are cooked, I have 2 more tortillas rolled out. But what I end up doing is, you're going to see how I'm going to take these tortillas and take the shredded beef that we're going to make tomorrow with the bone broth, and we're going to turn them into rolled little burritos. And it worked out perfect because when I got back from the mini girls trip that we went on, I was able to open up a jar of salsa verde, put that in a 9x13 dish, go ahead and lay the little burritos that we end up making with these tortillas and that beef. And the night that I got home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, I was able to serve my family a really hot, yummy dinner, and I didn't have to think about it. Everything had been prepped in advance, which was nice. So here I'm getting these tortillas on here, and I'm cooking them for about 45 seconds or so per side. I don't actually time anything. When they start to get a little bit bubbly and a little bit golden brown, I go ahead and I flip them, and then I cook them on the other side until they're fully cooked. I try not to overcook them because then they do tend to dry out a little bit, and I do reheat them before we end up having them for dinner. And then I always put my cooked tortillas in a towel. That traps the steam and that finishes the cooking process, and that helps keep the tortillas soft and pliable. When I first started making tortillas, I skipped that step and they were always dry, and
steaming them in the towel as they come off really does help give you a nice textured tortilla in the end. At some point, I would like to find a whole fresh milled grained tortilla recipe that is soft and pliable even the next day without having to jump through hoops to make that happen. But, you know, this is a journey we're on and we're just not quite there at this point. And these tortillas are delicious, so I was happy that I had some time on this day to go ahead and get these made up. Basically, what I was doing on this day was trying to, one, make our dinner and Josh's birthday cake for that night, but trying to think through the rest of the week and what do I have, and since I had some time today, what can I do today to make the rest of the week and going into the weekend a little bit easier. So by making these tortillas, by prepping the slow cooker dinner, by making the hamburger buns, it just was a lot easier to go into the rest of the week, having a lot of things already prepped and ready to go so that I could just think about other things. So I just rolled out the final 2 tortillas and I'm going to cook these up, and now we have a ton of tortillas.
I just took off the last tortillas, which is amazing. Now what I'm going to do is shape our hamburger buns, and then we're going to, I think, make our dressing for our coleslaw to go on top of our tacos, and then we're going to frost the cake. So I put this in my oven with the oven light on so that it would rise a little bit quicker. This is a little bit stiffer of a dough than last time I made hamburger buns. I think, unfortunately, I did add a little too much flour, but they'll still taste good, I'm sure. So I'm just going to get a little bit of flour on my hands. And how many hamburger buns did I make last time out of this? I think I made 8. They made pretty decent sized buns. Okay, so let's do 8 again. Did I do 8? I can't remember now. I'm gonna flatten these out quite a bit. Get these on my baking sheet, and then we'll let these rise in the oven with the oven light on for a second rise. What I'm going to do is go ahead and spray these with some spray so they don't dry out, because I don't want them to dry out on the top. That was probably a little more than they needed, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is cover these and pop these back into this oven. This oven's pretty nice and toasty. Not hot, but not cold. I have windows open to get some fresh air in here because I'm moving around and warm. And so my kitchen is actually pretty cool. And so I don't want these to rise in my kitchen. They need a little bit warmer of an environment. So those lights are on. That's probably gonna take another hour or so to rise. So I think what I wanna do next is actually go ahead and start on decorating the cake so that that can be done and I can kind of not really worry about that. I can just know that it looks good. I need to clear a spot though to make the cake, or decorate the cake, make the frosting. If this cake tastes anything like it smells, it's gonna be a winner. It smells fantastic. It smells more like a pound cake to me, but adding that little bit of almond extract, I think Josh is really gonna like. And to make the frosting, it's super, super simple. I already have the recipe in my head, and in here, I have part of the ingredients. I have the powdered sugar, the butter that's room temperature. This is why I wanted to get my dishwasher going so I could actually use this again. And I'm gonna mix, well, I think my butter is still a little too hard. I did put it in the microwave and then I let it sit in here for a minute. But but I'm gonna pop this in the microwave for another 10 seconds. Okay, there, that goes in there. There we go. I'm gonna add some vanilla. Oh, it smells good. This frosting is pretty thin, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pop this just like this with my paddle attachment here in the fridge to firm up for maybe 10-15 minutes, and then we'll decorate the cake. And so while this is firming up, we can make our dressing for our coleslaw. For the coleslaw, this is gonna come together really quickly. I've got 1 thing of garlic that I'm gonna put in there. I have 1 shallot peeled and chopped roughly, 1 bunch of cilantro. I'm gonna put cumin and coriander. I want this to be really bright and light to balance the really richness of the chipotles and adobo. And I did buy a jalapeno, but I can't find it, so I'm not gonna add it, but if I had a jalapeno, I would add that right here. I'm gonna add some sour cream and the juice of half a lemon here, along with a pinch of salt and a pinch of pepper. We'll blend this up and taste it and see if it needs anything. I don't think it needs anything. So that will go on our coleslaw later tonight for dinner. Kitchen has been tidied, dishwasher has been unloaded, and table has been set for dinner. So now we can frost our cake. Okay. Did I let this go in there too long? No, I think I'm gonna be able to frost it. It's nice and thick now, and it's not gonna just run all over the place. So that kind of worked out that I was able to get those types of things done while I waited for this frosting to set up. I was going to whip this again in my mixer, but I already put my mixer away and I don't feel like mixing it again. So I think we're just going to go with it just like this, I think. Yeah, I'll just give it a little mix with my offset spatula here. And I'm going to take some of this frosting on this mixer thing, paddle attachment, that's what this is called. I'm gonna get this on here, and then I'm gonna start frosting this cake. I'm trying to decide if I'm gonna trim the cake. Oh, I just broke that in half almost. Cake round, probably should. I'm gonna pop that on there. There we go. many hours later and we're still not quite ready to eat. It's only 4:30. I think that probably took me a total of 2 hours, maybe 3, to make and decorate the cake, make our 2 breads. These hamburger buns look beautiful and they're very big. So one will be more than enough. And then make tons of tortillas. A couple of these have already been gobbled up. You can see how soft they are. A few of them will be eaten for dinner tonight, but then definitely, hopefully, I'll be able to make up some beef roll-ups, burrito type things for my family for later. So this is great meal prep for this. And we got our chicken ready to go in the oven for dinner tonight. And we have our dinner ready to go for tomorrow. I also today made up a brine and started brining up a corned beef because I'm gonna attempt to make a homemade corned beef for St. Patrick's Day. And that takes a week or so to do. What else did I do? I did something else. Oh, I started a beef tallow rendering project. So it's been a busy, busy day in the kitchen. And tomorrow I'm not gonna have to think about food at all other than I'll make up a coleslaw and I will show you what that looks like tomorrow. I'll show you what all these dinners look like as they come to, I guess it's just 2 dinners technically, but we will eat on these for lunches and things for the foreseeable future. So there's 12 in each one of these. Josh is turning 35, so 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. I guess I could have just done the math a little easier on that, but I didn't. We just ran to the store and got these as a family. It was kind of a fun little trip out. Let's see, how am I gonna, I was gonna try to do this random. Can you ever truly do something random? Gosh. So I'm gonna keep putting these in here. I will see you as we pull all of these dinners together.
It was such a nice little family birthday dinner celebration. You're going to see what this cake looks like all lit up. I wanted it to just be glowing with candles, and I definitely think we achieved that. So I'm going to take off the parchment paper so that it looks nice sitting on the cake stand. And at this point, everything is done. All I have to do is package up these hamburger buns. I'm just going to put them in some Ziploc bags and the tortillas in some Ziploc bags, and then we will eat on them throughout the week. I'll show you what they look like when we have our shredded raspberry chipotle barbecue sliders. And then I'm going to get these tortillas made up. You can see how beautiful and soft they are. And if you guys have any recommendations on bread bags, I have seen a couple different brands online where it's like a cotton bag that is dipped in beeswax. If you guys have, a favorite bread bag for fresh made bread, I would love your recommendations. I'm just going to set these over here for now. I'm going to tidy up the kitchen and then I get to relax. We had about 2+ hours in the kitchen on this day, and it was so nice because I prepped dinner for today, dinner for tomorrow, and then it was actually a bunch of prep for a couple other dinners, just like bits and pieces, and it just made my life so much easier for the rest of the week. At this point, it's pretty close to dinner, so I am going to mix up our coleslaw with our cilantro dressing. That's going to go on top of our tacos. I am going to put our chicken in the oven. I'm putting it in a 425-degree oven until nice and golden brown and delicious. The pineapple was so incredibly yummy, charred in the oven like that. I really liked it, and I will absolutely make that again. Here is the tortillas. I did warm those up on the griddle pan so they'd be nice and warm. Our chicken is fully cooked with our pineapple. I have some shredded cheese. I have some pickled onions. I have some homemade hot sauce, and I have our coleslaw with some sour cream. We are going to make up our tacos however we want to make up our tacos. And then here is Josh's birthday cake, all lit up and beautiful. So it was just a nice contrast from last year having a 30-person dinner party to just my tiny little family enjoying a nice quiet evening together. It is now the next morning, and I am going to get my slow cooker turned on high for quite some time. Whenever I cook chuck roast, I usually just throw it in the slow cooker until it's nice and tender. So this cooked for quite a few hours. It was cold going out of the fridge, so it probably cooked for, I'm not sure, 8 hours or so. At one point throughout the day, it was done and I put it on keep warm. And then before I serve it, just like anytime I cook chuck roast, I'm going to pull the meat out. I'm going to take off any big fatty bits. I do strain the broth. You can see here, this is why I generally don't add very much liquid when I cook stuff in the slow cooker, because it does make its own juice and I don't want it too runny. So I'm going to get the meat in the slow cooker. Once the fat separates from the broth and kind of barbecue sauce, I'm going to put that back in, and then we are going to make our pulled beef sandwiches after I make some coleslaw. Now, a lot of times when I'm meal prepping, I try to think like, what is the similar items that I can do so that it's less thinking, like I made tortillas and we're going to use tortillas for the tacos. Then I'm going to use tortillas later in the week to make the rolled burritos. A couple of the same ingredients were in different recipes that I made for the week. And it just seems like easier to me because I'm already getting the ingredients out. Like Chipotle was kind of a theme, but it didn't taste the same. We had Chipotle tacos versus Chipotle pulled beef sandwiches. So I've got my coleslaw made up. That's just a traditional coleslaw, some mayo, sugar, salt, vinegar. Mix that up, put our broth back in. I'm going to cut my hamburger buns open. These were delicious. They were not as good as the last time I made the hamburger buns. I do think I added just a little too much flour. So that is definitely a good thing to note. You definitely want your dough to be on the more moist side than the dry side. So here I'm going to go ahead and top those with some beef, and then I'm going to top that with some Havarti cheese. You could use whatever kind of cheese you want, but that's what I thought sounded good when we were at the store. So I'm going to get that topped on here. And when I make sandwiches like this, I always like to take the time, if I have the time. I guess sometimes I don't have the time and I don't do it, but I do like to put these under the broiler. I just think the bread warms up nicely and the cheese gets bubbly and it just gets so delicious. And then don't walk away from it though. You want to make sure you have a close eye on it because it will burn easily. So here's what it looks like. I'm going to top that with our coleslaw, and that is what dinner looked like on this night. A couple days later, I made Philly cheesesteaks. We were able to use the same hamburger buns for those Philly cheesesteaks. It was delicious. And tomorrow, or actually on this day, you're going to see us make some yummy beef broth. I made the best beef broth I've ever made, and we're going to turn those tortillas into delicious beef burritos. If you want to see what I did for Josh's birthday last year, it was a 30-person dinner party. It was so fun and we really enjoyed ourselves. I'll put a video here where you can see what we did for Josh's birthday. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.